If you're running a major engineering organization, you know the product roadmap is everything. It's the lifeblood of the company. But let's be honest, in today's world, that roadmap is more vulnerable than ever. This isn't just about managing sprints anymore, it's about managing global risk. So today, we're going to break down a strategic playbook for how to protect your delivery velocity and build a much more resilient engineering organization using the nearshoring model.
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we're going to completely reframe how you think about your team. Then, we'll get into the real-world threats that can derail your roadmap. After that, we'll talk about a necessary shift in strategy, dig into the specific advantages of nearshoring, and then wrap it all up with a concrete 3-step playbook you can actually use.
So, first things first, we need to start with a core idea, a metaphor really, that's going to guide this entire strategy. You need to start viewing your engineering org not just as a group of talented people, but as a complex global supply chain. I want you to really think about this for a second. You're managing code pipelines, you're managing dependencies, resources, you're sourcing talent from all over the planet. So when you look at it that way, is your team a global supply chain?
The answer is, unequivocally, yes, it is. And that's a huge deal because it means your team is exposed to all the same shocks and vulnerabilities as a manufacturing line or a logistics network. That old assumption we all had of a stable, endlessly connected world, that's gone. Your ability to ship code is now directly tied to global stability, whether you like it or not.
Okay, so if your team is a fragile supply chain, what are the actual things that can break it? This isn't some academic exercise. Let's look at the very real geopolitical risks that are, right now, derailing product roadmaps for companies that look a lot like yours.
And what's so critical to understand here is just how direct these impacts are. An armed conflict like the one in Ukraine isn't some distant news story. For a CTO, it means a key team suddenly vanishes off the map. Sanctions aren't just political posturing. They mean your devs in a certain region could wake up tomorrow and be locked out of GitHub or AWS. Infrastructure sabotage, like someone cutting a subsea fiber optic cable, means your distributed team literally can't talk to each other. And these state-sponsored cyber attacks, they're not just hitting data centers anymore. They're going after your source code, your IP, and your CI/CD pipelines.
And this right here, this quote just perfectly captures the massive shift that's happening at the highest levels. This comes from KPMG's Global CEO Survey, and it says it all. The C-suite, your CEO, your board, they're no longer just asking, how can we do this cheaper? The big question now is, how do we make sure this doesn't break? For us as engineering leaders, that's a direct mandate to completely rethink our global staffing model.
So this new reality, it demands a totally new strategy. We have to make a pivot from a model that was obsessed purely with cost to one that puts resilience and continuity first and foremost. So here's what that pivot actually looks like. The old model, right? It was all about chasing the lowest possible labor cost, which scattered teams all across the globe. The new, resilience-first model thinks in terms of regional clusters. It prioritizes being geographically close, being politically aligned with your home base, and deliberately building in redundancy to make sure the business keeps running. It's a fundamental shift from just uncontrolled dispersion to controlled strategic globalization.
And the number one tactic for putting this new model into practice is nearshoring. For a US-based company, this means strategically building your development teams in Latin America. It's about finding that sweet spot, great talent, cost efficiency, and most importantly, stability.
And this brings us to the really good part, the benefits. So let's break down exactly how this nearshoring model delivers on the two things that matter most to any tech leader: mitigating your risk and actually speeding up your team's velocity.
First up, let's talk about risk. By operating within a trade bloc, like the USMCA, that's the agreement between the US, Mexico, and Canada, you get huge advantages in political and legal stability. Your IP and your data protections are clear, they're strong, they're enforceable. And because our economies are so tightly linked, the risk of some sudden, out-of-the-blue sanction is dramatically lower. You're not relying on vulnerable cables at the bottom of the ocean, and your exposure to state-sponsored cyber attacks from adversaries is significantly reduced.
But here's the thing a lot of people miss. Building for resilience doesn't mean you have to go slower. In fact, nearshoring can actually give you a huge boost in velocity. The key is the time difference. We're talking just 1 to 3 hours. This makes true, real-time agile collaboration possible. You're not dealing with those painful 24-hour feedback loops anymore. On top of that, you get high cultural alignment and English fluency, which just smooths out all the friction. And those critical in-person syncs, they become simple trips, not week-long ordeals.
And the talent is absolutely there. This is not a niche market. We're talking about massive and growing talent pools. I mean, look at Mexico alone, around 700,000 developers. Then you add Argentina and Colombia, and you've got another 250,000 combined. These are deep, skilled pools of engineers ready to jump in and integrate with your teams.
Okay, so we've gone through the problem, we've talked about the solution. Now for what I think is the most important part, your actionable playbook. Here are 3 concrete steps you can take starting right now to build this resilience into your own engineering organization. Step 1. You have to assess your exposure. You can build a simple resilience scorecard. List your teams, where they are, what they depend on. Then score them against those geopolitical threats we talked about. This will give you a stark, data-driven picture of where your single points of failure are. Step 2. Diversify your teams. A great rule of thumb is to set a strategic limit. For instance, make it a policy that no more than 50% of your total engineering capacity is located in any one country. And third, when you choose your partners, you have to change your criteria. Prioritize them based on their own resilience, their geographic footprint, their business continuity plans, not just on who has the lowest price.
So I'll just leave you with this one question. Your product roadmap. It's the engine of your company's growth. It is your single most valuable asset. So after everything we've talked about today, take a hard look at your organization and honestly ask yourself, how resilient is its foundation?